Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight we are continuing my series, Mythology and the Paranormal. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show at the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. Support is never expected but always appreciated, as there are expenses in making these shows. There are many ways to support the show. You can share the show with others and rate and review platforms. You can sign up for the Patreon feed and get all the extra content there for as little as $1 a month. You can also check out the merchandise and get all kinds of shirts and some other items featuring if I can talk, with designs made by friends of the show. And please also follow all our friends of the show. Of course, Jen, the Arcane Observer, who we will be talking to in a little bit here, has her own channel as the co-host of this show on Saturdays when she's able to make it. And Ricky of the Anything Is Possible podcast, who I join on Sundays on his show to talk all things paranormal. And Michael Strange, host of Trouble Minds Radio, which I also call into quite often, and the Trouble Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where you can hear all kinds of amazing shows online 24/7. And so I think that covers everything. So the idea of this series is I did a little research, did some searches online, and got some summaries of some things here of possible connections and similarities between mythology from around the world and paranormal, leading into to today, to these days. So, and we have a whole set of bullet points here, and we will get through as many as we can in about an hour's time, and go from there. But just real quick, I want to say welcome back, Jen. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that the quirks with my microphone are all sorted out, and it's good to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad as well, and I will get to reading here, and then I will go to you, and once we get done with bullet point, and we'll talk about them.
Sounds good.
So, okay. So, and speaking of that, let me get to the document here. You all for listening for the live. You listen on the podcast YouTube feeds, and yeah, let me get back to the document here, and we'll get going. This next point here says, and this is all basically similarities between global mythology and Greek mythology and modern paranormal experiences. So this next bullet point here says creation and order versus chaos narratives. The Titanomachy, Greek Olympians defeating titans. If I can talk, wow. Hindu devas battling asuras. Norse, and probably that's what I think I should say. I am going to not pronounce probably most of this right, so I apologize in advance for that. But they're talking about Norse conflicts and Egyptian Ra versus Apophis battle all depict establishment of cosmic order over primordial chaos. Modern paranormal lore similarly conceptualizes ongoing struggles between beneficial and malevolent otherworldly forces. And I think that's fairly easy to see if you look at people's reports of encountering very positive, what seem to be very positive and helpful and kind beings, and then the opposite. People have with terrible ones, so it seems to be terrible ones. Not to say that it's all as simple as that, but I think that is a common those archetypes in a way are pretty common as far as paranormal experiences go. And of course, there's the whole middle range and everything else. But yeah, I think that makes sense, and I feel like I've had a couple of encounters with some purely what seemed to be purely negative beings, and other encounters where it was very much positive and or at least neutral. Um, so yeah, but you're welcome to comment on that if you'd like, Jen, or we can keep on going.
Sorry there. Yeah, I noticed the same thing that there's kind of a theme where there's this dualism in accounts people have when they encounter anything kind of supernatural or paranormal. Obviously this what seems to be sort of a I wouldn't say good versus evil, but that there's kind of a trickster aspect, there's a more malevolent aspect, and then there's like more of a positive, and there's kind of a blend of all of it sort of happening at the same time. I don't know if it's individual, particular entities that, or spirits, or whatever, what have you, if they're individually of one particular, or more like humans in a way, where people have a myriad range of personalities that they can display, different types of characteristics that they may display, depending on the circumstances. So maybe it's even that some of these spirits, or maybe I don't know if necessarily even spirits is the right term, if these energies could conceivably have sort of all of these different characteristics rolled into themselves and display them at different times, it's triggered at different moments in our reality, that we would experience one version, one side of the same sort of cube, I guess. Like you're seeing one version one day, one side of it, flip it over, and very different sort of personality the next out of some of these entities, or if it is just multiple different entities. It's hard to say, I don't know, but it's always interesting. And a mix of the order and the chaos. Sometimes, like when people have Ouija board experiences, and people tend to think that it's separate entities each time, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a different, I don't know. There are different energies and characters. Sometimes, sort of like a cloud of different entities in one space, but it's one cloud, or I don't know if it's separate individual ones, but it's interesting. But yeah, there's always that duality there, in life in general, the good with the bad. There, you never know really what's going to come out of it, especially when working with the invisible realm like that. There's always the question of what you're coming into contact with, so it's always good to explore it, but also to, err on the side of caution. But yeah, in all the stories, it does seem to have that dualism aspect.
Yeah, I also think those individual aspects, that order itself can be good as long as it's not taken to extremes. Same thing with
Yeah,
a little bit of chaos sometimes can be good, but you don't want to go complete full on chaos 24/7. So I
exactly.
think those are, again, necessarily good and bad. It just, that's how it seems to people. I think in a lot of cases comes off that way, even if maybe that's not the original intention of whatever's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I think it's always good to keep that in mind and see where it goes.
right. So I'll get to this next one here. Uh, this one says flood cataclysm, sorry, narratives. Flood survival stories appear identically across Hindu mythology, Manu's Ark, ARK, Greek mythology, uh, Deucalion, I'm not sure about that, Norse mythology, Ragnarok, waters, Mesopotamian text, Gilgamesh, Hebrew scripture, Islamic tradition, and Aztec and Inca cultures, suggesting a shared archetypal human experience universally uh, encoded in different cultural frameworks. And even just the aspect of water and how moving water can have energy, and water being used to symbolize sort of um, that being associated with spirit, with consciousness, with souls, however you want to call them, and either some, I know I've heard of some folks that spirits can't cross rivers or bodies of water, and others say that they use them to cross, that it's they use them to travel along. So water definitely seems to be an aspect to all this, and so many paranormal experiences seem to happen around water. There's not even counting all the water that runs through the buildings that we all inhabit, but that's sort of secondary to all the waterways that are around everyone, and so I do wonder about that as well. Those connections between the paranormal and water as well. I don't know if you may be more familiar with the water in folklore and mythology than I am, Jen, but love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Well, I mean, think the flood myth is really interesting because, you're right that it just spans every single culture, every single mythology has some kind of flood story. It's saying, I think, that, at some point the entirety it's interesting because I mean you would think that it would only be people who live next to water maybe, but it seems like you hear this flood account the world over, even deep inland, these mythologies coming out about some kind of epic flood experience of some, at some point or another. But it might be going back to a different stage of the earth, I think, too. That there might have been that these ancient people experienced some kind of a cataclysmic event. Maybe. A lot of things hint at that. And so I think seeing that across all the mythologies would make sense if it was a shared experience and something deep in the primordial at some point, being overcome by the oceans. And then it lends too, I mean, maybe to the idea of the sort of primordial aspect of us all that we, starting out in the womb and everything in the waters. That there's something like that. And people have talked about that as being it is a type of portal, obviously, into life. So I think that it could be that it's the world, the earth itself is imitating the personal human experience as well, coming into existence. Maybe it's an analogy for that sometimes. But other times, though, it could be literal that you're referring to some, I think it could be literal, reference to some kind of massive cataclysmic event where people had different experiences of that to one degree or another. And then as far as like the different types, all the folklore talking about the bodies of water and the creatures that inhabit them. I mean, there's stories about the Nagas. You have these enormous, intelligent, not necessarily superior, but very wise serpentine sort of dragon-esque entities, the Nagas, accounted for in Hinduism, out of India, but also down in South America. And there was some talk that there was the same types of dragons, basically, underneath, the Aztec pyramids and things like that, that they were in these water canals under there. And there, of course, are the accounts of all the different types of, I wouldn't say cryptids, but, some people would say that if you were to take it as being, literally true with the mermaids and that. So, I don't know. I think that either there are these mythological creatures, or there was at one point these mythological creatures, or, I guess it could be an analogy for something that sounds like it is so literal that they are truly referring to some type of creatures that are not really known anymore, that once they were in communion with, and that shared some type of wisdom. And there are some mythos I remember talking about with, you remember Liam, that he was talking about Rohan. He was talking about that there were these types of, there was some era, some time in human history where humans were sort of in between, and in the world that they were able to, that they had to live sort of in and out of, they were almost amphibious, living in the ocean. But there are also different types of critters that are actually described as being able to go on land, though their native home is the waters. So, as far as, with actual cryptids, but then on the spirit realm of it, just that, the idea of the bridges and everything being having some type of massive symbolic, uh, you know, represent something symbolically about bridges in between different worlds or different time periods, that's linking together. People have described different generations and events um, also linked to represent a sort of bridge from one generation to another. So you have these literal bridges. I remember there was I think it was the John Keyes Bridge. There were bridges in the United States that kept having bombs or having accidents recently. And the conspiracy theory was that there was some type of demolishing of the symbology of the past to the present being destroyed by that bridge being destroyed. So there's this symbolic aspect of it, but there's also the idea of certain bridges people can't, like when they cross a bridge, they're leaving something behind, and certain things can't cross the running water, but they also can't cross the bridge. I don't know. So it's a constant theme, and it's really interesting. So there's something about the oceans itself, and I think that this being a water-centric planet, that it makes perfect sense that of the powerful influence that we would see from the aquatic realm in the primordial mind, since this is primarily this is an aquatic planet, mainly. We're the exception, actually, to be on land like this. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and I every once in a while I'll find an account of people seeing something strange going into or coming out of the water, and there's a couple of accounts I can think of that where one, I think it was like a boyfriend and girlfriend saw these I think they were like purple creatures that were in the water and kind of half bobbing up and out of it, like they could only see these things, and they were bald and they had like glowing eyes, and they were going coming out and going back into the water, and they were off the coast of somewhere, I think off in California somewhere. I could be wrong on that, but and then there was another one where I another post I shared on a previous show where these people saw this shadow figure thing going into the water and coming out of the water and going back into the water. So there's all this is the paranormal does not just exist on land. I mean, think of all the reports of ghost ships, not just abandoned, because that's a term used for those too, abandoned ships or ships that are found empty, but actual what appear to be ghost ships, non-physical ships that people see, and sometimes they're glowing, other times they're not, and then they just vanish. So lots of paranormal stuff happens near and in water.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely not just kept to the land itself. And a lot of the stories too about these islands I've heard about out of like sort of the Celtic myth, those Wales and the Upper Isles basically of Britannia, that they talk about these different sea folk that were these monstrous entities in some occasions, and some occasions these were warriors, but they're not described as being human. They're usually like misshapen in some way, or there's something about them in a way. But that they, there's always this account that they go away out to some type of islands or into the underworld, and many people took that to mean into the ocean, or that there was some type of disappearing, reappearing island, that was metaphorical for even for death, as a description of the realm of the people who have passed on, as there being some mystical isles out over the ocean, or that they go into the ocean for one reason or the other. So it's true that it's just a huge portion of the mythos with the water, the oceans, the primordial oceans and waters.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know about the island part, but yeah. Well, let's move on to this next one here. This one I've talked about this one a lot for modern experiences. Time distortion in otherworld encounters. Uh, And I always forget. I think it's Celtic, but I could be wrong. But they're Celtic mythology, uh, and there's this name I'm going to pronounce it. Mentions Avalon as well. Excuse me. Uh, Irish tales, uh, Scottish folklore, fairy mounds it mentions, and Welsh tradition document time flowing differently in otherworldly realms. Hours perceived as decades or vice versa. This parallels the missing time from alien abduction. It's not even just this, it's time anomalies that happen. There could be the explanation for what appear to be hauntings. There are just times when time seems to act weird. There's no aliens or anything else present. It's just something happens and you can't explain it. I've had the experience myself. Um, and there's no other entities around as far as I know. So, but yeah, time ways is something I've heard about through mythology, but also modern experiences, including my own. So I don't know if you ever had a weird time experience, Jen, but you're welcome to share if you have, or if not, it's okay too.
I mean, I have had instances where time seems to go by faster, or you completely lose track of time because you're caught up in something. But I've also noticed, like when I was living out in the country, out here in the Ozarks, there was this creek that had become overflowing. There had been a big rainstorm, and it was just, just plowing through this and destroying everything in its wake, basically. And you could hear it roaring from up the hill at the house I was living in. And you could see it through the trees how much it had risen. It was just such, a powerful force of nature, really. And after it kind of settled down and the waters receded, I had gone down there and it felt off. It was as if like the power of the water flowing through the gorge of the valley had created some sort of energy field. It almost like the trees looked different. Everything just looked different. Not physically, like not just that it was physically affected, but there was just this scented feeling, probably from just the massive amount of water moving through there and at the speed that it was, and then perhaps all the magnetism of the rock or something. I don't know, but it seemed to affect the way that time felt down in that valley. And that relates a lot to a lot of people talking about in folklore and stories of like, in fairy lore in particular, about different locations being sort of especially significant to these, I guess, elementals, these nature elementals, essentially, and that they were very active, or they were, more active at certain times. Maybe at a time like that, when there's been a great deal of, chaos come through from natural, sort of minor natural disasters such as that. But they might be more active, and the entities themselves could kind of carry their own sort of way that affected as a sort of force field. I've always thought that that could be a possibility. You come into contact with some of these powerful forces of nature, and then actually being near them could affect the way that you're experiencing time, because maybe the laws of time don't apply to them the same way, and that would explain why they can go through and be, sort of visible but invisible, almost in like a fourth dimension or something of that kind of that effect. But maybe their energy field sort of affect the way experienced. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I've heard of a who had experiences where they met someone, and this someone that they met seemed otherworldly. They seemed to have knowledge that they shouldn't have of the person's life, or of just things that have happened, or that things they were thinking about, and they at times seemed to be weird or strange, or at least the thing in and around, like around this person, was strange in some way. And I wonder if that is also it's because there was some kind of effect on time going on there. And so yeah, that makes sense to me. That seems like a good possibility.
Yeah. I remember the movie I
So
was watching, and they were
yeah.
talking about like they were talking about this particular type of entity that was coming around, and like that water that would be upwards or sideways, things like that, or that seems like time would stop in some way or that would slow down. Just the idea of an entity being able to affect the environment itself just by its force field being present, and once it leaves, everything goes back to normal. So I don't know. It's possible, that there could be these elemental entities or just these forces of nature that are a type of elemental intelligence. Example, or of the forest or what have you, and that their presence would affect the time. Actually, it makes perfect sense that you would consider them almost lords of time. If you think about the forces of nature and the elemental world and how the seasons coming in or how we tell time in general, that they have an effect on how long the season will go on. For example, in the case of winter, about 3 or 4 months, they really are ruling over, these forces of nature are ruling over this the way that we, and I eat the idea of the different times we've had as in the human race, considering time being kept by solar or by lunar calendars, and initially being lunar calendars. Many people think, I think the oldest timekeeping and the oldest mathematical artifact was this baboon bone that had 29 notches on it to represent, people believe, the lunar cycle and the lunar calendar. And it's one of the oldest artifacts on the planet. And I can't remember, I think it was like something like 20 something thousand years old or something. Maybe you could look it up. I don't have the exact number on it, but it's the oldest artifact, mathematical artifact on the earth. And it was a timekeeping, I believe it was timekeeping. And it was a baboon bone with 29 notches. It's most likely referencing to the moon. So you could even consider that and all the magic people have associated with the moon or the light of the moon and everything. But yeah, definitely there's something to do with it being a sort of egregore for humanity. Believe there is time, and we try to organize it.
Yeah, yep, definitely. As the time comes up, because I still don't know how to explain it, and I'll just go over this real quick, but there was this one time I was walking to this restaurant to meet my family there for lunch. Used to walk there almost every week, except for during this time of year. And I knew that the walk took me like 10 to 15 minutes, no matter what. Um, Even with like whatever, it was all sights. And this one day I was walking, and I went into a trance of some kind. I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but I did while I was walking, which is not something I let myself do easily because I'm walking and I have to be aware of surroundings and not get run and not trip over curbs and all that fun stuff or fall down or anything. But when I came out of it, I almost reached the restaurant and I got inside and sat down and I thought, well, I must be right on time. And looked at my phone. I had gotten there in 5 minutes. And I don't know how that happened. I don't know how that could have physically happened if I had been walking the way I usually walked. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm not sure what. I always wonder, what did people? Was there anyone on that street that saw anything weird? That they did they see some guy walking down the street if they didn't know me, suddenly just or blink out of existence and right before their eyes, or did I like stretch like you see like TV shows or movies shows when someone is fast, they like stretch into a blur or whatever, and what did they see, or did they see anything? So I'm always curious about that
Right.
as well. But
I don't
and
know.
it's funny
I
because
wonder,
speaking of, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, that people sometimes, I wonder if they even can see any, they might just miss it. I mean, there's so many people account that, one person will see something, then nobody else sees it. And so it kind of loses its credibility because, so, I mean, and anymore, you don't know if people are even paying attention to anything around them. They get off into their own worlds and they may miss a lot of things. But, yeah, I don't know if anybody
Yeah,
noticed or not, but
yeah,
I mean, it's odd.
yeah. I wish I had, and I wish that they knew me so they could have told me, but no one has reached out yet, and this was years ago now, so I don't think it's going to happen. but but also talking about the trances, this next bullet point here is altered states of consciousness and trance experiences. Shamanic practices across cultures, documented in Mongolian, Siberian, and indigenous worldwide, deliberately induce. Now, this is different from what I was talking about because I wasn't doing anything to do that, but induce altered consciousness to access spiritual realms and encounter non human entities. Modern paranormal experiences similarly report consciousness, out of body sensations, and dissociative states during encounters. So, and I can definitely speak to the out of body experience. That is something that I've been through many times and never intentionally. It always seems to happen. So, and many it's been to places I had never been to before, uh, and then months or years later, I'd end up going to that place and seeing it physically or being there physically after having this out of body experience going there in a dream kind of state beforehand. So, but yeah, there's a lot there. And so I'm going to toss it back over to you, Jen, because I have no idea where to start with that.
Well, I don't know. I think, it makes me think that it's a type of self hypnosis, is what I think it is akin to. But at those different types of rituals, or, if you look at it from any aspect, anything that's ritualized, whether it's like dancing or repetitively saying a prayer over and over again, or chanting, or doing any sort of ritualistic, sort of repetitive thing, or breathing, anything like that, I think is really a form of self hypnosis. So if you're able to maybe hypnotize others really well, but better able to hypnotize yourself. I mean, it could even be a power that a person has and doesn't even realize they know in a way. And it may be such a subtle thing too. You could be talking to an individual who happens to have a sort of cadence or voice, or there's a sort of you're watching something and there's sort of a like maybe a field of a grass and it's kind of waving in a certain way into a type that sets the brain into a certain pattern of oscillation or something, and the person goes into a sort of hypnotized state, and then they're able to control like how well they're hypnotizing themselves and getting access to their subconscious mind, and then they're able to access information or things that they know that they didn't know knew, and it's like that. And too, that they're able to perceive more closely the subtle cues of an individual they're talking to. They're able to pick certain things said that's not being said, but that's underneath the surface of what they're saying. There's sort of a seer aspect could come in as semi-hypnotized state that's um, self-inflicted in a way, instead of someone on the outside hypnotizing or some circumstances doing it. But there would be something simple as like by a stream or something like that that would create this sort of mental state. And I think that's why you see and hear people have these altered sort of experiences in places like Sedona, Arizona, or certain locations, by certain water sides or in certain mountains. But there's a hurt, like a whole effect coming from the atmosphere itself. In certain mountainous regions, there's a lowering in the level of oxygen. There's just this whole set of circumstances that are lending to a sort of, you would call it hypnotic sort of state for the mind, and would put them into trance. It's like state case where people are actually taking substances, which is a totally different thing entirely. Not so much as far as trying to alter the mind, but just I think in the natural world, there's the possibility of sort of intentionally or unintentionally setting yourself into a sort of self-hypnotized or hypnotic state. And also the idea of those entities too. They could also create sort of an experience where it turns out or something. Maybe, you know.
Yeah, and that's how that's his alpha state. And I can say I've been. So there's one year, a few years ago, I went with family for my mom's birthday. She wanted to go and stay in this cabin by a lake, by the lake, and we didn't really get to, there wasn't where we could swim on it, but in it, but it was still, we were right there, and I the waves, the shore was amazing, and I could sit there and listen. That was like my favorite thing that I did while I was there, because I'm not really much of a roughing it or outdoors kind of person. So, but I just love that sound of that water, and even just watching it, even though I'm legally blind, it, and it was really very relaxing while I was there. So, and that's just a natural thing. And I do think sleep and states that we there are different brain waves that happen while we're sleeping. Those are other altered states of consciousness as well. So that all counts. It doesn't have to be necessarily anything that we ingest to get to that point, obviously. So, but but yeah. So this next one here is something I've seen as well, uh, here and there, and this is spheres of light and manifestations of energy. It says ancient mythologies reference luminous manifestations. Egyptian talked about the discs and the whole the with Eric in a show a while ago. My gosh, that was a little while ago now. Anyway, Greek phantom ships, Roman shields, chroniclers Pliny and Levi, while modern paranormal investigations document orb phenomena as potential energy manifestations. Both suggest visible, non-corporeal entities. I think they suggest a lot more than just that, but yeah. And also, I will say, as I always say, when it comes to whenever paranormal investigations and orbs are mentioned, you have to be careful with that, because there can be things that can be appear to be orbs that are not. But then there can also be situations where people are seeing orbs with their own eyes while they're on paranormal investigations, and still capture them. So who knows? I think all the possibilities are there. But yeah, I've seen orbs here and there over the years. And I do think lights, I mean, they could be so many different things. They could be consciousness of some kind or other, human or otherwise. They could be G of some kind. And they're seen in so many places, in so many settings. Not really known to just be in one area, or one type of area. So really fascinates me, in and out of building, in nature, in the sky, but down out of or go around. If you, of course, in space. So a lot of possibilities there, and that's one thing we it's really often, as Jen knows, because it's just something that I'm really fascinated with, the whole orb and light phenomenon thing. So go ahead with your thoughts on that, Jen, if you have any.
Yeah, I've had experiences with heights. You know, it hasn't been any time recent, but some time ago. And um, I'll start with one story. There was an actually no, I'll say that on one occasion, a friend a long time ago, and like we were teenagers, and we decided to go to the gas station and get snacks, and we went out and we're sitting down outside the gas station just on the curb because we're kids, and I was looking straight up at the sky, and so were they, and we were looking up, and suddenly just one of the stars. This was before maybe it was a satellite, I don't know, but it didn't seem to be because I was looking up at the sky at this one particular spot at this star, and it just began to move, just move. moved first. It was stationary, and then it just started to move. And just so happened that we both must have been looking at it, because we both looked at each other, and were startled by it. And actually, like, we like got up and left. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. That's the first time I ever saw anything odd within. And I don't know, but it was like a stationary star, and then it just began to move. It was a streak that moved across the sky, and it hadn't been moving before that. It was because I'd been focusing up on the sky at that point. On another occasion, in working with the Ouija board, which I did quite a bit back in the day, some time ago. And on that occasion too, there would be photographed we'd take photographs and things like that. And these particular obvious lights would show up in the photographs, but no one would really notice them in the actual, in the instance of working with the board. They would show up in the photographs of us doing it around the board. And they would be different colors of blue, or sometimes like a reddish color. On another occasion, sitting around a table, and this was kind of unrelated to anything particularly going on, but I've talked about this on Mike's show too, and I've tried to understand what it could have been, but it was just a bright ball of light, probably about the size of somewhere between a softball and like a softball, like a bigger than a baseball, smaller than, say, a basketball, but pretty close to like a basketball size light. And it just began it appeared in on. Okay, so there were several of us, probably 4 of us, around a table, a long, and it appeared at one end of the table, and it moved the length of the table straight across the table, probably about 6 inches from the table, just right along the surface of the table, and we all saw it. And it went through, it kind of went, it hit me in the chest and like went out the window to my left behind me. It's a paranormal story. It's a strange account, but it happened, and it was, we all witnessed it. I saw it, and everybody else saw it. It was, I don't know what it was. I've tried to understand what it was, but it was just some type of light. And on another occasion, this is over the span of years, so this was not all it was. But then on another occasion, the particular room, the house that I was renting, and the middle room, odd. Like, I had this feeling, you walk by it, and it felt like there's somebody, like there's something looking at you, or somebody watching you from in there, And I don't know how to explain it, but it was a sense of being watched from this particular room. And it was the middle room, right in the center of the house. Pardon me. And you could go from the dining room and walk through the bedroom and go to the bathroom. So it was like a kind of cut between, but it was a bedroom, basically. But I, at one point, had my bed in that room, and I was laying there trying to go to sleep, and I started hearing this kind of popping off sound, like the sound you would hear of like the old something, where it kind of goes like it makes a popping sound, and like a sound like a furring sort of sound. But I was hearing that, and I sort of noticed the room was complete, and there was light. I don't know how to explain it. And it was above the ground against the wall, and it only lasted a few seconds. It was like these pops of light, and that was it. There was nothing else accompanying it. There was no sounds, but I described. There was nothing. It was like this sort of pop rock effect. Out of nowhere, it was just the oddest thing. But there was just something about that room to begin with. So the lights there's a wide spectrum of what people describe. There's the spook lights I've heard about, and they called, and people would drive out into the fields and look at across these over at the hills, and you would see these. It's described as being like these lights that appear almost like somebody's walking around with a flashlight or something, but they would move around on the mountain, and it's people would go specifically to see it, and people can look it up in the Ozarks. It's called spook lights, and it's almost like a tourist attraction, and people see it, and look, people can see what it is, but they can't explain it. So it's got no,
Yeah.
it's different stories about everything. Yeah, but yeah, the lights thing with you, because I feel well and I don't know how to explain it or what it could be, but it's definitely always accompanying these stories.
Yeah, I'm just glad nothing like I'm just glad you didn't feel anything like that light didn't like hurt you or anything when it went through you because I've heard of rare
I did feel some,
cases of that
I
too.
did feel
So,
something. Yeah, it felt
hmm
almost if you were to sort of touch, um, if you ever minor live wire, or something like that. If you touch something
oh
and it's got a
boy,
little bit of electricity running through,
yeah,
and it kind of like a little zap feeling. That's what it felt like. So I don't know what it was.
wow,
People have said, oh, it was ball lightning or it was this, that, or the other, but I don't know what it was. But it did have sort of almost an electric, very minor static type of feeling. But that was it. And it just kind of, it seemed in, it seemed intelligent the way that it just sort of moved across the surface of the table, and it was very contained, dense. But it was just, it lasted for seconds. Everyone at the table just kind of, we all just watched it do that. And I don't know what it was.
hmm,
But I've heard people try to say that maybe it's ball lightning or that. I don't know, because I've heard explanations of ball light. It didn't quite behave like that. It was just this orb of
right.
light. It was so strange. Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I saw the blue guy, and I tried sending my thoughts to it, and I told it it could come inside, and yeah, I got yelled at. Friends of the uh, joking, not joking, but it was kind of funny. It's like I'm sorry, I didn't feel anything negative from it, and but but like I normally do with but in that case I did. Um, but but yeah, luckily with me nothing happened. So, uh, but yeah, it's lights are, and I've seen just little tiny white lights flying around or vanishing here and there. Um, uh, just in my apartment because I keep my apartment really dark because of my eyes being so sensitive to light. Um, so, but yeah, everything is fascinating, and in some cases it's not just orbs; it's lines of light or flashes of light, all these things. So, but yeah, moving on to this next one here. We'll get one more, at least one more before we stop for the night. Maybe two. We'll see. This next one is fascinating to me. This mentions hidden from ledger information, logical access to divine or esoteric knowledge from Greek oracles, Delphi, Egyptian dead, Hindu sacred texts to Celtic fairy realms, granting prophecy, parallels modern paranormal claims, and or receiving hidden knowledge or revelations from non-human intelligences. And that to me is fascinating. I bring this up every once in a while too. I had a point where I was trying to make a decision about a couple of things I was thinking about doing, and I was there in my chair thinking about it, had my eyes closed, and in my mind's eye, in my in the darkness, I saw this light again. Going back to lights again, but it wasn't outside of me. It was inside my own mind, I guess, and it was like it kind of rose up from nothing and took the shape of almost like a winged humanoid kind of form, but like in miniature, like it was all just in my mind's eye. And I got feeling slash voice, however you want to call it, basically saying, "Go ahead, everything will be okay. Go ahead and do these things you're thinking of doing." And it's funny because I don't remember now what one of them even was, but I did both things, and one of them worked out fine. The other did not work out fine, really, overall, but it was still everything was okay in the end after it was all done. And so whoever or whatever that was, whether it was me or something else, accurate. It was not wrong. It turned out okay in the end. There was no permanent ill effects from my decisions. And that's just a personal small level of that. But I've heard of similar accounts and from what appear to be spirits or other beings about things that are going to happen or things that could happen. All these things. So yeah, that's definitely I think a valid parallel there that still happens from time to time. So
Yeah, I agree with
love to
you.
hear your thoughts
It's
on that,
like
Jen. If you, yeah.
well, like when people sort
Oops,
of,
sorry. Go ahead.
it's like a guardian angel or something. Like some people talk about that they,
Hmm.
it was fun. But people talking about that they have almost like this sort of a sidekick or pet of types. I've heard in Norse mythology they talk about that you have it's almost like it's a type of pet, and it's related to luck. Like you get luckier the more you kind of pay attention to it, and it's based off of like this sort of bravery or boldness, and it's almost like that type of energy feeds it. And if you neglect it, like that sort of kind of listening to your inner voice, that the more you listen to it, the keener it gets. But it's like a voice. It's more like taking this nudge one that way, sort of taking a chance when you normally wouldn't, but it can also be risky. So you have to kind of incline also this element of wisdom. It's almost like a trickster like aspect, but it almost is similar to like guardian angel mythology, where like it's kind of watching over you in a way, or it's kind of guiding your steps. But had that in that mythology as a sort of something that you're given when you're born, that you have like a soul and you have a spirit, and they're different. In some regard, sort of around your actual physical existence, and it's akin to like the wisdom of your lived experience. And then there's this other aspect that's sort of like an inner guide that knows all, but you can't access information at once. This humans sort of access it, and it knows about just life in general and existence in general, like like a private akashic record sort of thing. And then there's this other thing. I was just like a pet that's almost akin to the concept of people having a personal daemon or demons, and a certain type of certain sort of side of yourself. Boldness, bravery feeds that, and it acts out as a form of luck, allowing you to have opportunities that you wouldn't have, or being fortunate that, say, you left 5 minutes early and you missed an unfortunate event. So it shows that way, and the person responds by being aware of the circumstances of their daily life, that it's speaking to them, and also speaking through different omens of the natural world around them. So there's this weird idea of saying knowledge through just being aware of signs and omens. In Greek, like, okay, for example, in Rome, there was the Etruscans, and the Etruscans had the steeped in basically where they had this where they would look for signs and omens in all things. Their whole religion was just looking at signs and omens. And this popped up too later on when Rome really established itself. They still kept those priests that were from the Etruscans. And the whole situation was that there was this hidden knowledge available to all people. And I mean, there's some negatives and some positives, of course, with all things when you look at the history of it. Basically, that there's a knowledge available, but it's hidden in omens and signs, and that if you don't see those things, but I do say to access things you wouldn't know, but I think also too it'd be easy to deceive yourself. And in a lot of different mythologies and different stories and folklores, there's warnings against that and how it can lead you into folly by being too clear to yourself, and you'll get checked by almost like by it's just the sort of idea that you're being observed and watched by some unseen world. And I don't know if that's something outside of ourselves, or if it's something inside, or if it's something within. That is, but everybody has these types of odd experiences as they're going through their day to day, where it seems like certain situations line up perfectly, and other times it's like everything that's meant to go wrong does. And people for time talked about the alignment of the planets, or this, that, or the other, and all of that could be true. I don't know, but it is interesting, and I do think there's an ability to access that, but I don't know if I think it would take an entire sort of discipline unto itself, or a natural that a person would be aligned with it in some way. I think that maybe humanity has always tried through priests, through different types of rituals, align with that, with the oracles you mentioned, of the oracles of Delphi and everything. So it is, I don't know, but there's something to be seen. And when you get a little bit of a taste of that, and something you shouldn't have known, it's really experience, and people chase that detriment, I think is a good way to put it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't know, and I've heard of accounts even of people who see apparitions, or have things. I think we talked about this before too. Have things like their keys or their phones go missing for a brief time, so that they're delayed. They don't leave and right away when they plan on leaving, and then turns out there was an accident, or a terrible disaster that they would have possibly encountered if they had left when they were planning on leaving. There's Ricky from Anything Is Possible podcast has a story about that. He's told in the show before, I think a couple Sundays ago. But so definitely that's a part of that, and I think there's just so many examples of that, and probably examples people are always aware of. Uh, so now I think we'll do one more here, and then we will end this. And this next one says universal sacrifice and ritual propitiation. Across cultures, humans offer gifts, or blood, or ritual sacrifices to supernatural beings. Modern paranormal entities in contemporary accounts similarly demand or require uh, uh, offerings of energy, emotional states, or physical matter from humans. And so there's a lot there as well. Even with just the modern things, I've heard of people, for example, in some cases of uh, hauntings, whatever those are, whatever that may be, people find that if they leave their TV or their radio on, their activity in their location goes down a lot. Or if they leave water out, goes down a lot. And something fascinating. And that's not necessarily even, I don't even always what they think are spirits of deceased people. I don't even know if that's always the case. There could be other beings involved in some of those cases as well. So I find all that fascinating. That's what's so hard about paranormal, is there could be so many different things that are going on. There's so many possibilities as to what could be, and there are cool things going on in any situation as well. So, but yeah, your thoughts on that, Jen, and then we'll probably wrap it up for the night.
Yeah. I think that is a really interesting aspect of it. The feeding the gods idea, the feeding the spirits, intentionally or unintentionally. It's really a neat idea. I think that there's a lot to it. I mean, I don't know where to really begin with it as far as, you know, I remember reading in different books and things like that, and then talking to people who have um, delved into witchcraft and different types of, ritual where there's a feeding of something intentionally. It's almost like they have this invisible, they make something out of nothing. Typically, like after they've, initiated into something, into a certain faith belief system, they sort of make their own taltos or their own tulpa, basically, out of things that they find that are they're acute. And this is just one example of a feeding of something. It's like an intentional thought form, but you don't really know what you try to guide it, but a lot of times they don't know what it's going to become. But they go out and they'll dig. This is just one thing I heard about, and they'll dig a hole in the ground, and they begin to put these things that they find, and they'll find things, and they think that there's some kind of significance to it, and if they do think it's significant, they'll take that item. It could be any type of odd, odds and ends, so to speak, out your day or something that seems to be placed there. Maybe a penny in a hallway, or like a snake skin in a road, or something like that. And they round, and then they begin to feed it actual food, like fruit or meat and things like that. They'll like put it over the items that they found, and it's almost like it begins to, and they kind of pray and think over that all conglomeration of stuff, and it begins to create a thought form particular to that person. And there's this idea of feeding it, and it's to have some type of an intelligence to it, very minor level intelligence to it, but the longer it's around, it grows from there. There's the concept that many of the different ancient gods and things like that were sort of like that. It's almost like they're ancestral spirits, and people continue to feed them. Had passed away, they continue to feed and worship the ancestral spirit, and it continues on in some way. Closely linked to stories of vampires and things like that, also, where it takes on sort of almost a negative connotation. And I don't know that necessarily has to be attached to, that being a sort of ancestral worship of a type. But the strange phenomenon of something from beyond being given gifts from the realm of the living, and it being reciprocated back when they do that. And then there's this idea too of it growing ever more demanding, or that if you stop doing it, then something begins to get mischievous. Things start to get a little odd.
Yes.
So yeah, there's a bit of that. Like I've accounts where people come in offering, and then it increases, or it seems to it decreases initially. Seems to leave them alone, but then they don't continue to do it. They don't continue to put the offerings out. Like a cat that doesn't go away, and it gets more intense, and it's got an intelligence to it, and they've got themselves a bit of a friend. And sometimes they come in that way, and I think that there's accounts of people having these experiences. Entities could be people's lost, something that was created by someone intentionally or unintentionally, and get fed, basically. And the hungry ghost mythos actually is very close to that, out of out of the Pacific Islands, out of China, out of Japan. But the idea of the hungry ghost, kind of like that, and that you can create an altar out in the field to leave offerings, and it won't badly. But I think giving offerings and giving attention can be a very good thing. But it can only, you're tapping into all of that energy, whatever that is, whether it's positive or negative, and making a connection to the spirit realm. Spirit realm is the right way to put it because it seems to be in the physical realm. It doesn't seem that it is something in the beyond. It seems to be, active in the thing, a real world intelligent thing. It's just working at a different spectrum, or some in some way. But no, the feeding and the not feeding and not. There's so much about that that's really interesting in folklore and mythology for sure.
And I've heard of that similar things now with Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I've heard on different shows people talk about how they started leaving things. Sometimes just random objects, and after a while, if they forgot or were not able to, somehow they weren't able to leave something. Activity started picking up. They started the whatever Bigfoot or Sasquatch was or is would start going closer to their home and maybe making sounds and almost like they're upset that there's nothing there because they got used to it. So I've heard of that as well. So in modern times. So again, it's
Yeah,
amazing how many parallels there are to so many things in mythology and in modern experiences.
there was one account I heard, and I had a situation going around a house that I lived in. And, I was wondering to myself, like, if I think that there is something out there, because I did. There was something kind of, I didn't know what it was, but there was some type of, almost like that there was some type of presence or something out in the woods. There seemed to be. At least I thought so at the time. And this was some time ago also. And, I was kind of thinking about it. And, everything that I looked at said basically that they'll have what you're having. So if what you're
Hmm.
having is something like, say that you're having some spaghetti or something, you could leave out like a little bit of spaghetti. Or like, you went out, say, to a fast food restaurant and got some like fried chicken or something. You could leave out a little of that. Or if you're just having a grilled cheese, or if you're just having a little bit of soda, or this, that, or the other. But they'll have what you're. So
Hmm.
some accounts of some entities that like particular things, they'll say that they like honey, or they like a certain type of alcohol, or they like tobacco, or they like this type of scent. Often, you hear about that, like they like this smell, and so giving offerings of that, like in the Israelite religions, a lot of times it had to do with like meat. They liked the smell of meat, and the entity would come around for that. So there's all these different ideas about like what the spirit would like, and then trying to give it to them, almost like a type of. It's very interesting. But then there are these other entities that'll kind of just take whatever, and then there's the idea that what they want of energy from you. So you have these other type of entities that like
Right.
a certain reaction from you, and they're feeding off of that. And it's an odd thing to think about, but like some like fear or some like laughter. And so there's all these different, or sorrow, or so on and so forth. But there's this, in many different, there is account of that they have a taste for certain things. And that these certain things have lent to basically like the essence of what that is. And the more that you feed it, the more powerful it becomes. But at the same time, for example, if it's fear, well, the more fearsome it becomes. So it's
Right.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like a never-ending cycle there, possibly, which is not good in that case. So, but yeah. Well, that seems like a good place to end this for now. We'll get back to this in 2 weeks. I like to alternate to do this 1 week and then do the experiences next week. So, thank you, Jen, for being here as always. Amazing as usual, and glad to have you back and here whenever you're able to join me.
It was awesome to talk with you. I'm glad that I did with my technology and the Discord was cooperating. I had a great time. It's always fun to visit with you and talk with you about this. And thank you for having me.
No problem. Have a great night, and you can go ahead and if you haven't already, you already did. So we're all set. So I try to. Everyone, thank you for being here and listening in. Please follow everyone in the episode descriptions, all the friends of the show, as I always say. And we will talk to you next time. I will talk to you next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care. Oops, I didn't do it right. Let me do something real quick. Oops. Anyway, as the recording goes on longer, let me check here. Maybe I got it right. I don't know. We'll find out.